Hey, super excited to get a chance to speak to you. Wish I was able to be there. I'm currently traveling. So I want to speak to you about building in Web3 in 2021. There's four frontiers that I'm super excited about, and I just want to kind of unpack what those are and kind of paint a picture of what we might see happening over the next few months, and kind of as 2021 turns into 22. What we can sort of do with a bunch of the primitives that have been built over the last year. So I kind of want to start with why Web3 matters, because it's always really useful and grounding to remember why we're doing what we're doing, why the technology is important, how the technology can get into more and more users' hands, and what the broader impact of that can be. So I really see Web3 as the next generation of internet infrastructure. So in the last century, one of the most important stories in humanity has been the rise of computing. And that came with, at first, large-scale mainframes, and then we interconnected those through the internet. The web had a few different waves. And now the latest really important wave of computing is Web3. In the last, you can sort of look back at the last 80 years of computing and see that as one of the most important and transformational things that happened to us. You can sort of, just by looking at these pictures, you can see the massive transformation and the kinds of superpowers that we've acquired thanks to computing. Today, we are a massive network of billions of humans and trillions of computers, and many more programs interacting, interfacing, living and working together, integrated into a whole. So it is not just our networks and computers that are linked, humans, organizations, programs, and so on. We're working together in a highly integrated way. Every year, more and more of what we do becomes connected by the internet. And this, the platform that we're using, like the platform that I'm very lucky to be able to use to talk to you today, is this really amazing, malleable infrastructure that enables people to build superpowers and deliver them and deploy them to everybody in the world. This is one of the most important and transcendental things that humanity has built, just the ability for somebody to envision some new superpower that they want to produce, create that superpower, and deploy it broadly, globally, to everybody around the world. Like, this is one of the most important pieces of infrastructure that we've ever built, and one of the underlying reasons for why humanity has been able to do so many amazing things in the last few decades. And I really see this as early days. There's so many more changes that are going to come through computing. So new interfaces, things like augmented reality and virtual reality. Brain-machine interfaces are somewhere on the corner. Autonomous driving, AI systems, robotics. And then long-term, like the promise of potentially artificial general intelligence is coming. So the next century is going to be filled with even greater changes brought about by computing. So I like to sort of visualize this in a graph, because it's so easy to lose sight of just how fast and impactful these changes are. Just kind of like looking back 80 years and looking forward 80 years. Just imagine all of the changes that have happened, how much our lives as humans have changed thanks to computing and computing infrastructure, and then turn around and like look towards the future and take into account that technology and innovation tends to compound and accelerate, and just think about the wave of changes that are going to happen in that equal time frame. So our lifetimes are going to be filled with really miraculous pieces of technology arriving. And that, of course, is a double-edged sword, right? Because technology, it can be used for good. It's really important that the people building tech make sure to kind of aim towards good futures. So as these new pieces of technology are built and get deployed, they'll present all kinds of challenges. And it's really important that we aim for like really, really good futures, because as things like robotics and these new kind of interfaces get deployed, they're going to present enormous challenges to humanity. And I think one of the key instruments at our disposal is Web3. So through Web3, we can make sure to create robust and secure software infrastructure for this amazing platform that we've built for computing, to make sure that the applications and platforms that we're building make sure to protect people, put data in people's hands and make sure to protect broadly, human rights across the world. So when you kind of think broadly about Web3, just remember that it deeply matters how we bake in critical components and critical rights into the software infrastructure that we use, so that the future is a good one. And so at the end of the day, the sort of components that build Web3 are verifiability. One of the key things that Web3 brings is the ability to build software systems that are verifiable. Great. So with that, I want to kind of talk about 4 things in the horizon that I'm really excited about: safeguarding humanity's information, large-scale computation over data, building the metaverse, and funding science and public goods. So let's dive in. I started the IPFS protocol to make the web work peer-to-peer. So this is just changing the way that we address information on the internet. And I started the Falcon project to build the world's largest storage network and build a crypto-powered storage network. Really excited and proud to say that the last since Falcon launched last year, there's been this tremendous growth in the amount of applications and things that people are doing to build with it, and it's just been an amazing year. There's a ton going on, and it's super hard to summarize it. But now the network is about 10 exabytes in terms of total storage power, and that's kind of capacity in terms of storage being added to the network. There are thousands of storage providers around the world, hundreds of organizations building Falcon and building applications on top of it, and hundreds of projects and thousands of contributors. So it's a really amazing kind of rise for last year. And kind of the most fascinating thing for me is just how powerful the crypto incentives can be in kind of amassing a really strong storage network that can compete with cloud, the cloud giants. Being able to amass 10 exabytes in 1 year is just this kind of staggering figure, and that's really enabled by Web3 incentive structures. Some of the interesting look into kind of like the usage and the deals here, like the Falcon network is sort of building out capacity, and over time turning that capacity into usage. Most of Web3 is a few petabytes. Most of the data that's been generated by a lot of applications is just a few petabytes. So already Falcon has kind of accumulated that massive amount of capacity to now turning into converting Web2 uses into Web3 uses. So already a bunch of the people building a Web3 are starting to pull large-scale data sets and large-scale applications from the Web2 world and bringing them into Web3. It's been really cool to sort of see like the daily power addition, just on the order of like 60 petabytes being added every day. So that's a huge staggering scale. And now what the Falcon network is turning to is turning that capacity into useful storage. So here you can see the deals over time in the marketplace happening. So this is kind of useful storage being added into the network. And so we'd love to see how this changes over time. One of the really exciting things that people are building are things like storage interfaces that can tune into for specific applications. So one example of this is NFT storage, where all of the NFT platforms can connect to an interface that's tuned for storing NFTs and just address and store all of these really precious works of art and 3D objects and sculptures and so on in directly into IPFS and Falcon. And this is already we're seeing like this massive use of this interface and storage into IPFS and Falcon. I think on the order of like 4 million NFTs are stored on through NFT storage, which is like super staggering. Like that's an enormous amount of objects. And so kind of looking ahead to sort of like the next wave of Web3, there's a lot of bridges that are being built across different networks and into Falcon. What's super exciting is being able to kind of be the storage providing network for Web3 in general, and kind of building connectivity layers so that smart contracts and applications built in these other networks can make use of Falcon storage and be able to kind of store their computations and whatnot. And so some of the things that I would love to see in the future is kind of like starting to turn stock photo and video archives into and collect and bring those, which are predominantly Web 2 right now, and bringing those into Web 3. I think that these are kind of sort of ripe for changes, because these are kind of applications where there's a lot of creation and art coupled with monetization and rights providing and so on. And this is sort of like, in my view, ripe for turning into a Web3 platform. I think the storage scale is there for applications like this. They just need to we need sort of entrepreneurs to come by and create these Web3 applications. And one thing that I'm super excited about is open access science platforms. So we're getting to the point where we can already Falcon is accumulating a large amount of data sets that are important scientifically. So things like genomics databases and large-scale imagery of astronomy and different kind of geological data sets and so on. And kind of the next frontier there is starting to connect and aggregate all of these important artifacts as part of the scientific process and turn them into kind of paper archives and interlinked science artifacts, looking at the figures and the data directly and being able to distribute this really cheaply. So one of the really amazing things is that Falcon can provide extremely cheap storage to these platforms. So oftentimes these groups are really underfunded, and sort of seeing them transition into Falcon and Web3 will be really exciting. Great. Let's. So once you have a bunch of data, what do you do with it, right? So most of the world, this is kind of like a snapshot of the scale of the computation in Web2. This is kind of a snapshot from 2019. There's an enormous amount of operations that happen on Web2 today, and Web3 is not yet at that scale. So though Falcon can amass a huge amount of storage to be able to provide access to store the information, we don't yet have computing that can match this kind of scale. So I think one of the really important things that we'll see happen over the next year or two is the growth of internet scale computation coming to blockchain systems. And so this means we need to hit this sort of scalability target up and to the right, where we need to take the kind of high level of security that blockchains give us and really target the kind of level of computation that the cloud of Web2 gives us. So that's sort of the target that the whole blockchain space needs to aim for. And I think we'll see this develop over the next couple of years. So it'll, of course, be iterative, and it'll take a while to get there and to build the right architectures to deliver this kind of performance. But I think it's one of the really exciting horizons for this. Already, we're seeing some interesting experiments in the Falcon community where people are starting to add computation platforms around the Falcon storage nodes. So and also connecting them to other computing platforms that are out there. So things like LivePeer and Videocoin and Golem and others are starting to get connected in. And one of once you have that computation, then you can start layering things like machine learning and layering things like notebook computing and data science tooling and so on. And so that's what's going to really enable all this data to be broadly useful. So yeah, I would look for really interesting projects over time that are going to bring this level of scalability and computation to the broader space. Changing gears for a moment, the metaverse has been increasingly a big focus for the crypto space. There's a ton of visions of the metaverse. Things like Ready Player One is probably the most iconic pop culture reference these days. But the broader vision of the metaverse has been evolving over time through things like games and online and sci-fi novels and online communities and so on for a very long time. So I think that this is kind of the metaverse in fragments and shards that are going to start getting connected. And we're starting to see that metaverse take shape today through some amount of Web2 oriented games and platforms developing in Web3. So we're starting to see platforms create structures around NFTs and cryptoland and so on that enable the creation of spaces and environments that people are starting to associate and spend time in. And so I think that the metaverse will be brought about by these experiences being stitched together that any one platform. There's a lot of kind of visions for the metaverse and kind of how this might happen over time. It's a huge topic for a lot of groups. I think one of the key things that's going to enable this is kind of the rise of NFTs as an asset that people associate with and want to use and want to interact with other people through. I think this is what's going to enable us to stitch the metaverse together and build it out at larger scales in a very open access oriented way, as opposed to kind of like lockdown platforms that are controlled by single parties or things like that. So I think NFTs kind of give rise to open virtual worlds where people start interacting, and then those kind of start to specialize along verticals. So things like museums and galleries are one example, but over time you can sort of see composable things and rooms being built out. So I can't wait for people to start dropping entire rooms as NFTs and then wire those rooms up into larger environments like whole buildings or whole cities and so on. So I think this is the way that we get to the metaverse. And super exciting to see a ton of groups driving in this direction, and can't wait to then couple these with interface improvements in AR and VR and see where that takes us. So really kind of it's a super exciting time to build the metaverse. So get out there and play. The last thing I kind of want to talk about is funding science and public goods. So I see the world as having this really huge problem right now where there are two incentive fields, one for science and one for technology building. In academia, we have kind of very strong incentives to maximize the generation of kind of top papers, and it sort of generates this publish and perish environment. And on the flip side, in technology, which is sort of led by built out through corporations, there's a pressure to maximize revenue and not necessarily translate technology. So there's this big innovation chasm in the middle where we're missing effective coordination systems to help translate science from academia into the market. So this is where I think public funding mechanisms, which are being pioneered in crypto, can really help a ton. So I think it's still very early days. There's a few experiments here and there, but we're starting to see the generation of incentive structures and funding mechanisms to kind of close this gap in the middle. I think that this is a really key area that the market's not, the sort of like broader product-oriented market is not sufficient to help improve. And this is where kind of broadly accessible public good funding is going to be super impactful. So I would keep an eye out for projects like this. And if you have great ideas for how to do things like this, definitely bring them on. It's another area where like NFTs might turn out to be important. So things like certificates of impact and experiments could be constructed as NFTs, and sort of like you can do public funding through that and kind of lean towards patronage, or you could lean towards kind of celebrations of the works and so on as a way to celebrate the results and whatnot. So again, early days, but we'll see what happens. One of the things that I'd love to see is creator addresses in NFTs start weaving into public funds for the actual the people creating these experiments, to the labs building the work, and so on. So think of creating a network, not just one or a few artists, but like really creating a whole network of value creation hung around the NFTs. And so the trades of the art or the certificates of impact about some important work start contributing and funding future work in those fields. So I think like this is early days still, but it's going to be a really impactful thing. So again, public funding mechanisms, look out for those. And the last message is really to tell everybody in the room that the future's up to you. The tech that's going to be built out over the next few decades is going to be super impactful, even way more impactful than the tech that has been built out for the last 2 decades. Lean into Web3 to build secure and robust software infrastructure, help aim for really great breakthroughs. And if you're looking to get started, this is a phenomenal year for developers. There's a ton of opportunities to build new ideas, tons of hackathons being organized, lots of accelerators, lots of grants, and public kind of funding mechanisms and investors that can help you get started. Great. Well, thank you so much, and have a great rest of the conference.